It started with a discovery no one was prepared for: a small, sealed container found behind an abandoned house in New Britain, Connecticut. At first, investigators thought it might be nothing more than discarded storage. But when they pried it open, the truth inside was far darker than anyone imagined. What they uncovered would unravel a secret that had been hidden for nearly a year: the remains of a 12-year-old girl named Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia, a child who should have been in school, laughing with friends, and dreaming about her future. Instead, her life ended in unimaginable circumstances. Welcome to Truthful Crimes, where we explore real cases with empathy, accuracy, and respect for victims and their families. If you care about stories that reveal not just what happened, but why it matters, please take a second to subscribe and help us bring more awareness to cases that deserve answers. Now, let's take a closer look at how this heartbreaking story began and how a community went months without realizing that a child was missing. When police received a tip about something suspicious found behind a vacant home, they couldn't have known the full scope of what they were walking into. The box was tightly sealed and hidden in a corner of the property, as though someone had gone to great lengths to keep its contents from ever being found. Inside, detectives found the remains of a young girl. It didn't take long for investigators to realize that this wasn't a recent tragedy. It had been hidden for some time. Soon, DNA testing confirmed the victim's identity: Jacqueline Torres, a girl who had once lived in nearby Farmington with her mother, her aunt, and her mother's boyfriend. She had reportedly died sometime in the fall of 2024, and for months, no one outside the family seemed to know she was gone. Investigators later learned that the family had moved from Farmington to New Britain shortly after Jacqueline's death. What they brought with them, however, was the unthinkable: her body, allegedly kept in a container that was later left behind the vacant property. Police say it's likely that Jacqueline had suffered severe physical abuse and malnourishment before her death. Those words alone are hard to hear, but they reflect the reality investigators are now piecing together, one heartbreaking detail at a time. The arrest came swiftly after the discovery. Carla Garcia, Jacqueline's mother, was taken into custody and charged with multiple offenses, including murder with special circumstances, conspiracy to commit murder, intentional cruelty to a child, and unlawful restraint. Her bond was set at $5 million. Her boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, faces the same severe charges. And Carla's sister, Jacqueline Garcia, has also been accused of playing a role, charged with risk of injury to a minor, intentional cruelty, and unlawful restraint. Each of them, investigators say, had some part in what became one of Connecticut's most. According to school records, Jacqueline was withdrawn from public school in August 2024, just weeks before she was believed to have died. Her mother reportedly claimed she would be homeschooling her. That one decision may have been what allowed this tragedy to stay hidden for so long. Authorities now say that Jacqueline's case exposes deeper systemic failures, from the school system to child protective services to neighbors who may have seen signs but didn't realize what was going on inside the home. By the time her body was found, nearly a year had passed. As investigators continue to piece together the timeline, one thing is painfully clear: this wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate cover-up, involving multiple people who allegedly conspired to hide what they had done. And while 3 adults now face serious charges, Connecticut residents and the nation are left asking how this could have gone unnoticed for so long. In the next section, we'll look at how detectives began to unravel the timeline, the crucial evidence that helped them trace Jacqueline's final months, and the questions investigators still can't fully answer about what really happened inside that home. It's one thing to charge someone with a crime. It's another to prove exactly when it happened, especially when the body was hidden and the victim was never reported missing. That's the challenge detectives now face in the case of Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. From the moment the remains were discovered, investigators turned to every available clue to build a timeline. They know the body was hidden in a sealed container behind an abandoned property in New Britain. They also know the family had lived in Farmington before moving. But what happened in between? For starters, officials estimate that Mimi died sometime in the fall of 2024. That window is based on asterisk forensic analysis, while autopsy results are still pending. Medical examiners can often estimate a time of death by examining tissue, degradation, bone condition, and other markers. Asterisk school records. Records show that Mimi was withdrawn from public school in August 2024, with her mother indicating she would be homeschooled. That date provides a possible endpoint for when she was last publicly seen. Asterisk digital footprints, emails, phone calls, social media messaging, and location data from cell phones help trace when Mimi was last in contact with others. In such investigations, even small details, a text message, a social media post, can help shrink the timeline. Asterisk witness interviews. Investigators have reached out to family, neighbors, and friends to identify the last times Mimi was seen in public, or when she was expected but never arrived. Even casual, everyday interactions, like someone seeing her outside, can be clues. Asterisk family movement. When the family relocated from Farmington to New Britain, detectives needed to know when that happened and what was transported. They believe the remains were moved. Asterisk during that relocation, which helps place a latest possible date for when the body was moved. Putting all these pieces together is like assembling a puzzle with many missing parts. There's no single smoking gun that pinpoints the exact day of death. Instead, it's a cumulative case built on overlapping evidence. As detectives deepened their investigation, they began focusing on three main areas: medical, digital, and human. Medical and forensic evidence. Even though decomposition can erase many clues, forensic pathologists can still identify signs of long-term neglect, indicators like malnourishment, bone abnormalities, or organ damage. The hope is that the autopsy will reveal how long Mimi may have suffered before her death. Phone records, text logs, social media threads, they're all vital. If Mimi's phone pinged a certain cell tower after a given date, or if a message was sent to someone, it gives a reference point. Similarly, investigators may look at the devices of Carla Garcia, her sister, and her boyfriend to uncover patterns or suspicious gaps in communication. Witness statements and observations. Sometimes the most powerful pieces of evidence are simple memories. Neighbors who might recall seeing Mimi at a certain time, or a friend who expected to hear from her but didn't. Those clues help fill in gaps and corroborate digital data. In a case like this, even a small, seemingly inconsequential detail can be significant. With evidence accumulating, law enforcement moved forward with arresting Carla Garcia, Jacqueline Garcia, and Jonathan Nanita. But charges alone don't win cases. They need to be backed by proof, connections, and motive. The key questions are: asterisk who had access to Mimi during those final months, asterisk who handled her remains, asterisk who was in direct communication with her, or closest in the chain of custody, asterisk, and perhaps most importantly, who may be the weak link, the person most likely to cooperate and provide testimony against the others. Prosecutors are often strategic. If one defendant agrees to cooperate, they may receive a reduced sentence in exchange for evidence or testimony. That person becomes a critical lever in breaking through the layers of secrecy. Despite what's known so far, many questions persist. Asterisk exact time of death. Even with forensic tools, pinpointing the specific day may not be possible. Asterisk how long the remains were stored undetected. Was Mimi's body kept in a basement for months? Who knew? Asterisk why no missing persons report, especially since the family had moved and relations with state agencies were known. Why was Mimi never reported missing? Asterisk what was the role of child services, given that the family had prior contact with the Department of Children and Families, DCF? Where did oversight fail? Asterisk coordination among suspects. How closely were Carla, Jacqueline, and Jonathan collaborating? Who knew what and when? The case of Jacqueline, Mimi Torres Garcia, isn't just a heartbreaking crime. It's a mirror held up to the system, meant to protect children. While 3 people now sit behind bars, Connecticut officials and the wider public are left asking the same painful question: how did this happen under so many watchful eyes? Authorities have confirmed that child welfare services had previous contact with the family before Mimi's death. Exactly how recent those interactions were remains unclear, but that fact alone has fueled outrage. If an agency already knew there were concerns, how could a 12-year-old vanish for nearly a year without anyone noticing? Former investigators point out that this kind of failure doesn't happen overnight. It's usually the result of a chain reaction, small oversights that build up over time, a missed visit, a closed report, a change of address that slips through the cracks. By the time anyone realizes what's wrong, it's already too late. Many experts also highlight how overburdened and understaffed these agencies have become. Social workers may juggle dozens of active cases at once. Follow-up visits can be delayed for weeks or months. Add in limited communication between departments. And it's easy to see how even a case involving a child like Mimi could quietly disappear from the system. It's not an excuse, but it is a devastating reality. One of the most disturbing parts of this case is that no one reported Mimi missing. Not a teacher, not a relative, not a neighbor. Investigators say this silence points to something deeper: isolation. After being pulled out of school, Mimi's world seemed to shrink to just the people in that house. With no one outside regularly seeing her, her disappearance could go unnoticed indefinitely. In many similar cases, homeschooling can unintentionally shield abuse. Without regular contact with teachers or peers, there are fewer opportunities for adults to notice warning signs, like bruises, malnutrition, or emotional distress. Advocates have long argued for policies requiring routine wellness checks for homeschooled children, especially when a family has prior contact with child services. It's a measure that could save lives, yet one that remains inconsistently enforced across many states. As the investigation continues, prosecutors are working to make sure every responsible person faces justice. Carla Garcia, the mother, remains the central figure, charged with murder under special circumstances and conspiracy to commit murder. Her sister, Jacqueline, faces charges of cruelty, neglect, and unlawful restraint, while Garcia's boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, has been charged with assisting in disposing of Mimi's remains. Authorities believe Nanita may have been the one who physically moved the container behind the abandoned property in New Britain, the act that finally led to the case being uncovered. But investigators also know this story doesn't end with arrests. The work continues behind the scenes, gathering evidence, cross-referencing timelines, and seeking out inconsistencies in witness statements. Every new discovery could strengthen the case and bring clarity to what truly happened inside that home. Still, even if all three are convicted, there's a broader accountability question, one that reaches beyond the courtroom. What about the systems and institutions that failed to intervene? Could this tragedy have been prevented? In the aftermath of tragedies like this, communities often look inward. Parents, teachers, and neighbors ask themselves if they could have noticed something sooner. Lawmakers debate what policies could prevent the next case. But there's one universal truth that can't be ignored. Awareness saves lives. Children like Mimi don't just fall through cracks. They fall through gaps in awareness and responsibility. People see signs of neglect or distress and assume someone else will act. Agencies receive reports but lack the manpower to follow up immediately. Over time, a child's suffering becomes invisible. That's why advocates stress the importance of speaking up early and often. If something feels off, a child suddenly missing from school, never seen outside, or showing signs of fear, it's always better to make a report than to stay silent. The worst-case scenario of overreacting is far less tragic than doing nothing. For the people of Connecticut, Mimi's case has become more than a headline. It's a rallying cry for reform. Candlelight vigils have been held. Local leaders have called for new oversight measures. And community groups have begun organizing support networks for at-risk families. Because at its heart, this story isn't just about crime. It's about a systemic failure that cost a young girl her life. And it's about the urgent need to ensure it never happens again. Jacqueline Mimi Torres deserved love, safety, and a future. She deserved to be protected, not forgotten behind walls of silence and neglect. Her story is a painful reminder of what's at stake when systems fail, but also a chance to push for change. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching and keeping Mimi's memory alive. Cases like this aren't easy to discuss, but they're necessary, because awareness can be the difference between another tragedy and a life saved. If you want to support more stories told with compassion and integrity, subscribe to the channel and help us continue shining a light on stories that matter. Because justice doesn't end in the courtroom, it begins with understanding, awareness, and the courage to care.